Welcome to the CSBP Fertilisers Grow Better podcast, sharing knowledge with growers on leading crop nutrition, sustainable agriculture and other issues impacting the agricultural industry.
G'day everyone and welcome to another episode of the CSBP Grow Better podcast. My name's Grey Johnston and I'm very pleased to be joined for his hat trick, his third appearance on the show by our Supply Chain Manager at CSBP, Rusty Burke. Hello Rusty.
Hi Greg, good to be here.
Thank you Rusty, good to have you on, and we know that your editions of the CSBP Grow Better podcast are particularly in demand amongst our listenership because you are the person who has his finger on the pulse of global fertiliser markets, and of course that's what you're here to talk to us today. So let's charge into it, I think. What are the big issues influencing the global fertiliser market at the moment?
The big issues, particularly on the supply side, are probably the same ones that have been around for 12 months, but where it is different is the impact that they're having on that fertiliser market. So maybe if I choose three of those, and maybe firstly if we look at the Russia-Ukraine conflict, that's been around since end of February last year. But it was when it happened, there was a large and quick impact on the fertiliser market. The countries that were impacted, that were Russia and Belarus, were pretty much very quickly cut off. It was hard to get fertilizers out of those areas. And what has happened over time is we've seen countries that are probably more agnostic towards the conflict willing to buy from those areas. We've seen shipping companies willing to support that, the marine insurers, the financial institutions willing to support it. So alternative trade routes have opened up which allow fertilizers from those countries to get out into the world. So they're different trade patterns to what they were a year ago, but they are effectively moving fertilizer around. So that the impact of that from that side has been diminished. But also the other big point about the Russian-Ukraine conflict was Russia has been for a long time the largest gas supplier to Europe. That was reduced at very short notice and left Europe in some strife. And that flowed through to the nitrogen market because the nitrogen uses gas as a raw material. And so when Russia cut that back and the prices went up, a lot of the nitrogen producers actually shut down, and that impacted the nitrogen market greatly. As happens over time, Europe has found alternative ways of, for example, getting gas, and they've increased their capacity to import gas in the form of LNG, and so that impact again has been reduced. So that was the one big thing that's been around for 12 months now. The other big thing that's been around for 12 months is the Chinese export restrictions, and if you think why China did that, China was really trying to protect its local market from the very high price of fertilizer that the world was experiencing. Mm-hmm. And so they put various restrictions in place. Firstly, from a pure incentive perspective, global prices have dropped, so the incentive for them to have those export restrictions is diminishing. But more importantly, the way they did it, they put in very complex and unclear permitting systems for the exporters to get the product out of the country. And over the last 12 months or 18 months, those exporters have found ways of managing that system better so that the uncertainty has been removed, and so that again the impact of the Chinese export restrictions have reduced. And then the third one I just want to mention are sanctions from conflict anti-countries. So let me use that terminology. So in recent times, countries that were initially not willing to buy from the players involved in the Russian-Ukraine conflict have now said, in the interests of food security, they are willing to carve out fertilizer as an exception to sanctions. So, for example, for the next 6 months, the EU has removed tariffs on Russian fertilizer imported into that region. So again, you're starting to see a normalization of trade and fertilizer. All of those, the three big factors are still there, but they're just having a lesser and lesser impact.
And Rusty, on those last couple of, big issues you mentioned, the export restrictions and the sanctions, do they impact any nutrient group in particular?
The China export restrictions very much impact the nitrogen and phosphate markets. China is a big exporter of urea and a whole range of phosphates. The sanctions is more wide-ranging. It affects the full range of nutrients.
And so I guess I take from that each of those big issues that you named contributing to, in some way or another, a normalisation of pricing towards longer term trends. Is that how we think about how these are impacting global fertiliser pricing?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And it's interesting now if you look at the position that we're in now compared with what we were 12 months ago, and we're almost in the polar opposite in trends on pricing. So 12 months ago we were really seeing all nutrient pricing surging up, and we were seeing enormous volatility in, for example, the nitrogen side of things. And so we were trying to manage supply chains in a steeply rising and volatile market. What we're seeing now is the exact opposite. We are seeing prices falling across all the nutrients, and we're now trying to manage a supply chain in a falling market. And as everyone realizes, people's behavior in rising and falling markets are vastly different, and that flows all the way through the supply chain.
I guess we've been very focused there on global supply chain and global factors. Are we seeing those forces flow through to the WA market?
The WA market is no different to the global fertiliser market, or in fact any other market. I mean, if you just think of our own behaviour, when we see prices falling, we want to hold on as long as we can. We want to hit the bottom. Everyone wants to get the cheapest price and be able to say at the end they bought at the bottom.
And is there any then particular area of concern or area of nervousness in relation to the product that you're looking to procure?
If you look at the time of usage and we say, well, if we look at the nitrogen side, we've got a little bit of time up our sleeve. So those sort of decisions, we can kick the can down the road a little bit on that. But on the cropping compounds, it is getting our nervousness now as well. If people don't commit, maybe we don't need that last phosphate vessel. So we are seriously questioning whether we should take the risk on that last phosphate vessel or not. So we will be gathering information over the next couple of weeks and making that call.
And you touched on cropping compounds, and you touched specifically on phosphates there. I guess, are there specific product issues we should be thinking about in our market at the moment?
My take on this is as in previous years. As I said, the imports that we have seen have been similar to previous years. So if you look at when the cropping compounds are needed, and you look at the start of the seeding season, most of the product that is going to be brought in is either here or it's on the water, and most of it has been priced. So if there are significant changes in the global fertiliser market now, they are probably not going to have much impact on the West Australian fertiliser market. So cropping compounds things might change in the next week or two, but they are pretty close to being done. You
mentioned nitrogen, there's still a bit to play out. Any specific factors there?
So on urea, I would say, we would probably be looking. We've got some product available to sell. We would be looking to replace that in March, April, May as the product starts moving. So there's a lot more time to play on the nitrogen side than there is on the cropping compounds. And when I talk about cropping compounds, I'm talking about potash as well. That is clearly part of the equation. A lot of the potash is already here, and that I probably want to take this time to. Potash is probably the one we called wrong to the greatest extent at the end of last season. We were the way we read it was we'd seen that the two big potash players, which were suppliers, two of the three, Belarus and Russia, and the third one being Canada, Belarus and Russia, were looking more and more isolated. Our prediction was that Belarus would stay isolated, and that's largely proved to be true. We thought Russia would become more isolated than it has, and we did not read the extent of the global demand destruction when prices went to the levels they did. So potash has fallen further and faster than we predicted in July last year.
So you've shared some messages that I know, I guess, will be of incredible interest to many of the growers out there listening to the Grow Better podcast. Is there then, and I guess you've shared, been pretty frank around where CSBP's at and our perspective of the market at the moment. So, we thank you for sharing those, and I think, interesting for me to hear about and interesting out there for everyone else. Is there anything then finally that's keeping you awake at night or that's a particular concern for you?
I think the two, one I've already mentioned. We need to decide whether we're going to bring in that last phosphate vessel. That's a big issue to us. And the other one that probably makes me nervous is 90% of my job is buying the product and getting it here. I'm pretty confident we're well down the track on that. What I would hate to see is us get into the position where that product is not in the right place at the time it's needed. I look at this very simplistically and I see the most amazing harvest we've had, and a lot of truck drivers. When we started this position, we were short of truck drivers and trucks, and those are going to be occupied in moving grain probably longer than we've seen maybe ever. We know they then move on to lime. Only then will they move on to seeding compounds. And as I said at the beginning, because of the sentiment that there's been around falling prices, we are well behind on what has already been picked up. So there's a backlog to be collected there. And what happens when you concentrate all of those things together, you can't move the start of the seeding date. So everything else is just getting compressed. And eventually you get to the stage where you see the pressure in the appointment book. And I'd hate to have people find when they want to buy their fertiliser, now they can't get a slot and they've got to wait a week or 2 weeks. So I would love it if people would just get the start getting some fertiliser on farm. So when seeding starts, they've just got something to go with. That's the one thing. And the other thing is, if they intend to buy significant amounts of phosphates, probably the next week or so is a good time to let us know so we can make that decision on the last phosphate vessel.
A somber message there, Rusty, and as always, delivered with your customary gravitas and insight. And we're very grateful to have you here on the show. So thank you for sharing those messages, and thank you everyone out there for joining us on the CSBP Grow Better podcast for the third edition we've ever had with Rusty. He's our highest hitter, our highest scorer on the podcast, and great to have you back. Thanks, everyone. Make sure you follow us at CSBP Fertilisers on all our social channels and get in touch if you've got any suggestions or ideas for the show. But apart from that, I've been Grey Johnston. Thank you, Rusty Burke. See you later, everyone. Goodbye.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the CSBP Grow Better podcast. For more information about CSBP, please visit csbp-fertilisers.com.au or connect with us on social media at CSBP Fertilisers on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and LinkedIn. This podcast is provided as general information only. The content of this podcast is not a recommendation and has been prepared without taking your objectives or circumstances into account. Before acting on the content of this, you should consider its appropriateness to your circumstances and seek independent advice.